Salam, hello. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Corporate Council on Africa, I would like to warmly welcome you to the US-Africa Business Summit. As many of you already know, I'm from Kenya, so if you don't mind in Swahili, I'd like to say karibuni and welcome. We are here today in a land celebrated in both revelation and in reason, as the cradle of civilization. According to biblical accounts, it was from this land that the Queen of Sheba set out to Jerusalem for her dalliance with King Solomon. Long before Helen of Troy or Cleopatra, she was a woman who helped shape history in a man's world. And now we are discovering from evolutionary biology just how much Ethiopia has contributed to the creation of the world that we live in today. According to science, it was from this land that Homo sapiens set off on a terrestrial and a maritime quest that led to the building of civilizations, cities, and communities. Clearly, we are gathered in a city that is historic and one that is an intellectual center. But wait, we are also in a place famed for the coffee bean. So should your energy levels falter even a little at this conference, be rest assured the original and the real caffeine is just a sip away. Addis Ababa is a poetic name, and it means new flower in Aramaic. It is also the land of new opportunities. Ethiopia is the fastest growing economy in the world at a time of global economic turbulence. In Davos this year, Ethiopia was described as one of the most resilient economies in Africa, along with Rwanda and Mauritius. Our leaders are making history, and so is the Corporate Council on Africa. This is the largest US meeting of any kind ever held in Ethiopia, according to the Ethiopian Foreign Ministry. This is the first time the Corporate Council on Africa is partnering with the African Union. It is also the first time that the African Union and the Ethiopian government are co-hosting such an event with an American business association. The current global economic environment of a China that is slowing down, low commodity prices, especially oil, volatile currency fluctuations, security questions, all means that conferences such as this one are becoming increasingly important, with global investors, local partners, and governments all at the table. And we all know that the best way to do business in Africa is to be in Africa. It's also increasingly important that our own media and our citizens are able to tell our own economic stories, where global investors and travelers get the real story. That's our story. The patron of the summit is Sheikh Mohammed Hussein Alamoudi, the chairman of the board of Midrock Ethiopia. Now, unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, so to represent him is Dr. Arega Yirdao, the CEO of Midrock Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome.
Your Excellency, Ato Maram Desalegn, Prime Minister of the Republic, the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And on behalf of my colleagues, welcome to Addis. At the outset, allow me to extend my appreciation to the Corporate Council on Africa for the opportunity to speak with you today to share our experience working in Ethiopia. My name is Arega Yirdao, and I am the CEO of Midrock Ethiopia Investments in this country, which is part of the global Midrock International conglomerate chaired and owned by the known business tycoon Sheikh Mohammed Hussein Ali Alamoudi, who has extended his business in several countries, including Ethiopia. Midrock Investment is a pioneering private investment in Ethiopia dating back to the 1990s with the establishment of different private limited companies owned by Sheikh Mohammed and his families. Currently, there are more than 70 Midrock affiliated companies operating in Ethiopia. The companies are engaged in different sectors of the country. During the last 2 decades, Midrock made unparalleled investment in the country and has made significant contribution to the economy. Midrock Ethiopia Investment is engaged in investment and operation that encompass 9 major sectors in the economic activity of the country. In the agriculture and agro-processing sector, Midrock companies are involved in the production of meat, poultry, coffee, tea, cereals, vegetable, flour, fruits, etc., for local and foreign markets. In the mining and exploration sector, Midrock operates several companies, including the commercial-sized gold and silver mine operation, cement, different varieties of marble, granite, and critical raw materials needed as inputs to industries involved in production of glass-like products. In the manufacturing sector, Midrock has a number of companies which produce soft drinks, tires, plastic and non-plastic products, paints, detergents, household and office furniture, metallic and aluminum products, and many more. In the real estate and construction sector, Midrock has 3 major companies that are engaged in the construction of iconic buildings and roads in the city and in many parts of the country. In the hotel sector, Midrock is involved in operating the magnificent luxury collection Sheraton Addis, the Avanti Blue Nile Hotel, the soon-to-be operational luxury hotel close to the African Union headquarters in the city, and others. In an effort to support the potential in futuristic smokeless industries, that is tourism, Midrock, in addition to availing hotels, have companies operating in surface and air transportations, airport catering and ground handling services, car rentals and tour services, and provide support by availing key products for the road construction effort that is being implemented by the government with exceptional effort for the benefit of all of us involved in the rapid expansion of the economy. Midrock Investment is also involved in the energy and petroleum transportation and distribution network that is required to accelerate the development of the country. In the education sector, Midrock provides postgraduate, graduate, and other specialized courses relevant to the needs of the country via its Unity University, which is the first private institution of higher education in the country. In the service sector, Midrock is contributing in the delivery of proper services to the community by having companies engaged in wholesale, retail, import and export, and trade activities. As a result of its multi-sector operation, Midrock Investment is also indirectly supporting the growth and expansion of the financial sector, as well as the national treasury. Excellencies, the continued operation and expansion of Midrock Ethiopia Investment for the last quarter century is a testimony of the continued improvement of the investment and business environment that existed and continues to exist in Ethiopia. Midrock, with its constructive engagement approach and policy with the government and other relevant regulatory institutions, has observed and experienced the positive and constructive attention that continues to be given to the private sector by the government. Demonstrated political stability, well-articulated growth and development plans, the continued improvement of key infrastructure needed for growth, and the expansion of universities to accommodate the industry's needs for manpower are among the major factors that enabled Midrock to expand its number of companies that are responsible for the employment and support of over 100,000 employees and family members. The investment by Midrock is considered by many as ice-breaking, since it came at a time when the country's potential was not this much known and many feared to enter. Currently, the different companies making huge foreign direct investment in Ethiopia use Midrock as their litmus test or reference for their move in the country. In this regard, Midrock has proudly served as a testimony to indicate or ascertain how conducive the business and investment environment became for new investors. Just like anywhere else in the world, the underdeveloped infrastructure, administrative hurdles, unfair global competition, undeveloped standards and business ethics are some of the challenges which Midrock had to pass through with positive and dedicated constructive engagement and active participation with all stakeholders to improve the situation. Having said this, Midrock now enjoys the much improved business environment made possible by continuous effort from the government and other stakeholders with whom it has been continuously engaged. Excellencies, as a result of rapid growth, the future could be challenging, but the kind of challenge that Midrock may be facing will be different and for a different reason. Midrock has a potential and strategic advantage by being upfront from many of its partners and competitors. Midrock will continue to use its experience and long presence in Ethiopia to further enhance its operation. We are open to work together with others for future growth and expansion. Midrock would like to see other investors take the advantage of the ample opportunities and be on board the development wagon and makes the nation the best that it can and will be. Ethiopia is open for business, and we look forward to have you join us. I thank you.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce a man who has traveled to more war zones than I have, with a hard hat and a briefcase and plenty of guts. He's done business in many challenging environments, bringing electricity to homes. Through Symbian Power, where he serves as the CEO, he has spent over 30 years building large-scale power plants, transmission lines, and substations in the US, Middle East, Afghanistan, and Sub-Saharan Africa. He has been the chairman of the Corporate Council on Africa since 2012. Symbian Power is one of the founding private sector partners of President Obama's Power Africa initiative. In fact, President Obama helped launch Power Africa at one of Symbian Power plants in Tanzania in July of 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Paul Hinks.
Morning, everybody. Zain, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for agreeing to be the MC for us at this conference. Your Excellency, Haile Mariam Desalegn, Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, Your Excellency, Dr. Dlamini Zuma, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, the Honourable Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the US Assistant Secretary of State for Africa, Executive Governors, Honourable Ministers, Honourable Ambassadors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all protocols are observed. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I've had the honour of serving as the chair of the Corporate Council on Africa for the past 4 years. 2016 will be my 5th, and it will be my last term, and I look forward to handing over the reins to a new chair later this year who will drive this organization forward with energy, enthusiasm, and purpose. CCA is, without a shadow of doubt, the leading organization in the United States that promotes trade and investment with the African continent, and we have held that position for the past 23 years. There will be many new and exciting developments this year as we continue to ramp up our activities. We have started 2016 with a new acquisition, the Africa Travel Association, or ATA. ATA is the leading travel and tour association for the African continent, and we will be continuing their tradition of holding 2 conferences per year, one in the US and the other in Africa. This year's ATA events will be held in Kigali, Rwanda, and in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US. I hope we will see some of you there. CCA's leadership in the US-Africa business sector is on full display today, and it will be during the course of this conference. This is only the 2nd time we have held the US-Africa Business Summit in Africa. Last year, when terrorists staged heinous attacks in Paris and then in Mali, we worried, the board of CCA and the management worried, that it might affect attendance at this summit. Our fears were heightened when Burkina Faso became the latest subject of an attack on the African continent. We wondered what effect this may have on people traveling from the United States to Africa. But our management did not falter. Steve Hayes in particular moved forward, and we had remained with confidence that we can succeed. At the last count, this morning, there are 1,200 people registered for this conference. That is more than we had in Chicago 2.5 years ago. You have voted with your feet, and you've shown all of us, especially our African partners, the terrorists who think they can disrupt business and investment on this continent will never succeed. By your attendance here, you have also endorsed the Corporate Council on Africa, and I promise you that we will not forget it. We will redouble our efforts and provide you with an even more energetic and valuable service this year and in the future. Hopefully, those of you who are not yet members will consider joining. We want you with us. So thank you for being here. Please give yourselves a huge round of applause for making this conference a statement of the interest that exists in investing in Africa today. Now, if I may be so bold, let me ask you all to deliberate over the next few days in a candid, open and honest manner. Doing business in Africa is not easy. Doing business anywhere is not easy. And it will help you all if the public sector and the private sector understand each other's concerns and each other's needs. Let's make this a really useful dialogue that we can all take away as a lesson learned or lessons learned. So please, to all of the speakers, the panelists and audience members, let us not be afraid to discuss the uncomfortable truths with each other. And let us not automatically reject partnerships between the United States and other countries where our cooperation can benefit Africa and each other. And yes, that will include Turkey. We have a delegation here from Turkey. It will include China. I know that there are people registered from China. We're all here to do business in Africa, and where possible, we should try to work together. This is a great start to the 2016 US-Africa Business Summit, and I'm convinced you will enjoy the great program and connections at this time. I would like to thank the many partners who have made this event possible, including the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and to name just a few: Midrock, the Rockefeller Foundation, Chevron, ExxonMobil, my own company, Symbiont, Ethiopian Airlines, Yasmi, Acro Bridge, AGCO.
With the Renaissance Dam. We also have the Wow Dam in South Sudan, geothermal energy along the Rift Valley countries of East Africa, and with dropping prices in solar technology, projects such as the Nzema Solar in Ghana, the Zangwali solar plant in Burkina Faso, and other projects across a number of countries on our continent, as well as wind projects such as the Lake Turkana wind power. And I'm sure if the weather was good when you went to Makele, You would have seen some of the wind farms here in Ethiopia. Excellencies, though often these projects are driven by public-private partnerships at national levels, they all form part of a broader integrated framework through the regional energy pools. But we realize that we need to do much more and do it faster in order to have the much needed energy to power our industries, households, and agriculture. Coming to agriculture and agribusinesses, through the targets set in the Common African Agriculture Development, countries are increasing investments in agriculture, and those who have invested in agriculture are already showing significant increases in productivity as well as reduction in hunger. Moreover, at country and regional level, there is greater focus now on agro-processing, so there are opportunities in that area. The issue of investing in the next generation remains critical with our youthful population and a huge gap in every skills sector. We must give young people hope for the future, otherwise they will continue to migrate in search of greener pastures or be lured by extremists and criminal gangs. At the same time, we must acknowledge that across the continent, young entrepreneurs and innovators are doing extraordinary things with just a little bit of support. I want to use this opportunity to appeal to the private sector from the US and from Africa to do more to help to train young people and give them experience. During April this year, we will convene a conversation with governments, private sector, and academic sector on this very matter in Mauritius, and the critical link at human capital development and other priorities such as infrastructure development, industrialization, and agriculture. A lot has been said about trade between Africa and the US, and indeed it is an area of cooperation that was identified. But let me just say that for meaningful trade, African countries to move beyond exporting raw materials and importing most of our finished goods. This situation is largely responsible for the vicious cycle of underdevelopment and poverty. So trade for us on its own is not enough. We have to develop our productive capacities to industrialize and develop. We can see this even on our continent. Most regions of the world trade over 50% of their goods among their neighbors. But we are a notable exception as Africa, with intra-African trade only now approaching the average of 16%, with East, West, and Southern Africa at about 20%. So our approach to infrastructure, road, rail, ocean, aviation, as well as energy, ICT, therefore, is about not only connecting African countries, cities, and rural areas, but also to build intra-African trade. So I'm very glad that American business is here, and we've been told to also speak about unpleasant truths, and I'll follow Linda's lead. America is probably the biggest investor in Africa. But why have we not changed the lives of ordinary people? Most of the investments have gone into extractives. Sometimes they don't even touch the land. They come from the sea out and across the sea. And that is not going to deal with poverty on our continent. And that's why Africa hasn't got electricity, but 26 of our countries are producing oil and gas. We are producing coal, and we are doing our best. But I think, for me, this is a great opportunity to begin to turn that, to make sure that investments go into industries as well, which give more employment to young people, which give us more revenue. So we hope that this is part of the beginning of that change. So we also want to say, last but not least, because I'm sure the Prime Minister will be giving us a very detailed account, but I just want to say, women are part of this continent, and they have to be part of business. And it's their right, but also we cannot use half of our talent, because none of us use half their brains. We use our full brains. So the continent must also use its full talent, and that's women. And they are organizing themselves in the maritime. They've created an organization called WIMA, Women in Maritime, and I hope that they will get partners. They are in ICT, and they've joined the extractive sector as well, to mention a few. And of course, empowering women also makes business sense. We also know that when you include women in boardrooms, in the workforce, in the management, the impact on that company is great. And companies that are led by women are more competitive than others. So we must include women if we are talking about inclusive growth. And I want to just wish you a good and productive deliberations at this, and hope that it is yet another building block towards Americans investing in Africa and Africans investing in America, but also remembering that this is all about changing the lives of our people. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now to a man who has a love for science and scholarship, a great businessman who brought satellite radio, world space, to some of the poorest areas in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Noah Samara, Chairman and CEO, YASMI USA.
Mr. Prime Minister, Chairperson of the AU, Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning to all of you. I'm honored and privileged to be here. When Nelson Mandela traveled here over 50 years ago, he said Ethiopia has always held a special place in my own imagination, and the prospect of visiting attracted me more strongly than a trip to France, England, and America combined. I felt I would be visiting my own genesis, he wrote, unearthing the roots of what made me an African. I second Mr. Mandela's notion, because when I visit Ethiopia, I too feel like I'm visiting my own genesis, perhaps maybe because I am Ethiopian. I was born and raised in this country. This is my homeland. Its populace are my people. Amharic is my mother tongue. Yet on recent trips to Ethiopia, I'm less overwhelmed by my own genesis, more actually stunned by the country's transformations. The words that now resonate with me come from travel writer Philip Briggs, who said, "Ethiopia confounds every expectation." Ethiopia confounds, as does Africa. Those of us who have loved this continent are overjoyed because Africa now confounds in a wonderful way. Today, Africa is ascendant. It rises as the world's most dynamic place. Late last month, the world heard from Davos that Africa is home to 9 of the world's 15 fastest growing economies. Across Africa, the middle class is expanding as never before, creating both demand and wealth for domestic economies. Better still, the driver of this middle class growth is Africa's renewable resource of human intelligence and entrepreneurship, not exhaustible earthly things like minerals and oil. The brain drain is reversing. Africa's sons and daughters are coming back. They are repatriating skills, know-how, and energy. They are returning to restore Chinua Achebe's world that had once fallen apart. After living in Europe, Asia, and the Americas, they understand that to seize great opportunities and enjoy the good life, there ain't no place like home. There is no place like home, and Africans are showing they know how to take care of their house. Take Ethiopia as an example. It has shown rapid growth in its development, evidenced by its increase in power generating capability from 2,000 megawatts of electricity 5 years ago to what will soon be 8,000 megawatts. It's built out of over 60,000 kilometers of roads that now interconnect the entire country. Its 2,500 kilometers of railroad infrastructure, which when finished will bring the country's areas of production closer than ever to local and global markets. Its fourfold increase in mobile subscribers, going from 7 million to nearly 30 million in the last 5 years, and its 30-fold increase in internet users during the same period. Its exceptional achievements in primary health care, which has drawn health ministries from other countries to come and learn how Ethiopia has successfully implemented this service. And then there is its remarkable commitment to education, where preschool enrollment has gone from 4.8% 5 years ago to 43% this year, and a 10% increase in primary education over the same period. While enrollment among secondary school students has been slower, the country's commitment to education is indubitable. It is self-evident. Ethiopia and its neighbors, the new African lion economies, are propelling the continent to heights hitherto unknown. These African countries are bucking conventional prescriptions and charting their own ascendance. For years, international institutions have told African countries how to run their economies. Ethiopia, among others, decided to take its own counsel, follow its own path to economic growth. The indicators for Ethiopia are amazing. Authorities at the international financial institutions are at a loss to explain the country's economic expansion outside the scenarios these institutions normally prescribe. Ethiopia is showing there is more than one path to economic growth. The country has had the acuity to identify its own solutions, the courage to pursue them. Africa is ascendant. It rises on the strength of self-sufficiency. Behind Africa's achievements are innovation and confidence, skill and proficiency, ambition and desire. These achievements confound African expectations and they astonish the rest of the world. Such dynamism makes Africa a great place to do business. Africa is ascendant. The continent's accelerating momentum is unstoppable. Of course, we have to acknowledge challenges like the Ebola virus and other evolving superbugs that are impervious to antibiotics, extreme ideologies that poison mind and soul, conflicts between states or ethnic groups that exact a terrible price, and weather patterns like El Niño that cause havoc with drought. Yet, Africa is stabilizing to be able to deal with these and other challenges. The biggest challenge, paradoxically, may come from Africa's success. Growth in new jobs Africa is creating is outpacing its ability to fill them with trained personnel. This challenge is an opportunity for Africa because It has the youth that is necessary to fill these jobs and do the heavy lifting that focused development demands. 65% of Africa's population is below the age of 35, making Africa the most youthful continent. By 2020, it is projected that out of every 4 people, 3 will be on average 20 years old. Africa's challenge is to educate and train these youths to fill the opportunities that are being created for them. Indeed, for Africa to sustain its growth, it must be able to educate the youth. Failing to do so will not only make these jobs disappear, but more importantly, frustrate a burgeoning youth population with the daunting prospect of nothing to do. Our summit's opening plenary focuses on infrastructure, and growing nations need more roads, railroads, power grids, communications links, and airports. However, while physical infrastructure is absolutely necessary, it is not sufficient. Nations must build human infrastructure, which is the most critical infrastructure of all. Unlike the static and solid character of physical infrastructure, human infrastructure thinks, it builds, creates, it responds, it changes, it adapts, it's malleable. To understand this dynamic, let's look at America's mightiest infrastructure, the interstate highway system. It now encompasses nearly 77,000 kilometers. In today's dollars, it costs $499 billion to build. Some economists estimate America's ROI is over $1 trillion. Many, however, think it is much, much more than that. But the value of infrastructure is a two-way street. Clearly, people get value from interstate highways, but inert highways in and of themselves get immense value from knowledgeable and skilled people. For an educated and energetic populace, a highway system becomes a tool to start business, build wealth, disseminate culture. The physical infrastructure of interstate highways can enable an individual to go from Addis Ababa to Khartoum, from New York to Los Angeles. Human infrastructure can enable a nation to go beyond our imagination. A nation's prospects, its competitiveness, its fortunes depend on human infrastructure, and human infrastructure depends on one essential component: education. Call it knowledge, call it training. Notwithstanding the progress Africa has made, the need for the hour is to educate the 56 million school-age children who are out of school. Many of these children are, for example, in Ethiopia. If simply reaching such a massive number of individuals is daunting, equitably providing high-quality education and training may seem an impossible dream. But for Africa in general and Ethiopia in particular, to maintain economic growth, it is imperative to meet this challenge sooner rather than later, lest opportunities that are being created disappear before they're used up. My company, Yasmi, has developed a unique solution to address the challenge that has hindered African countries from building the human infrastructure of all their people. The Yasmi system can deliver massive amounts of educational material directly to every student and every teacher without the need for internet or electricity. The Yasmi system contains 5 elements: a specially engineered satellite that covers every inch of the African continent and can broadcast directly to a tablet. The world's first and only satellite-enabled tablet, a device that ingeniously uses a small antenna to receive content directly from the satellite without the need for internet connectivity. A solar power unit capable of charging the tablet when and where needed, obviating the need for electricity. An inexpensive classroom server with Wi-Fi to continually store satellite data transmissions as a backup for students that may have missed it, provide on-site teacher training on pedagogy and subject matter expertise on a lesson-by-lesson basis, offer every student a summary of the lesson, test the student on each lesson, grade the lesson, provide analytics on student learning outcomes. The server will also house an extensive library of books to inspire a love for reading. Finally, the fifth component of the YASME system is content, and here our focus must be intense. Our world is a highly competitive place, and we want Africa students to compete successfully. YASME is working with private and public institutions in and outside of Africa to deliver a blend of the best educational material available anywhere. In effect, we are working to deliver a world-class school or training institute, if you will, on each tablet. A simple 7-inch tablet can enable super teachers to train all the teachers in a country or a continent how best to teach every subject, lesson by lesson. A 7-inch tablet can provide the top 1,000 books inspiring rural and urban students alike in the art of reading. A super trainer can instruct 1,000 IT workers or healthcare providers or agricultural extension agents on best practices. The infrastructure doesn't care if it's 1,000 students or 100 million. There is no congestion on this system. Imagine a simple tablet bringing the best of education and the best of training to anyone, anywhere across the continent without the need for internet or electricity. The YASME system is fully operational. It is ready to serve. YASME is committed to empower Africa to execute educational strategies that work. Both governments and private sector in Africa can leverage the solution to improve teacher performance, reverse lagging learning outcomes, and provide vocational education. In sum, YASME is ready to effectively and economically provide abundant support to trainers and trainees, teachers and students across the continent. Africa is solving its own problems. YASME is a decidedly African solution to an African problem. Africa is rising. Captain Yagzero has just taken off from Addis Ababa Airport on ET 500. As the Boeing 787 he is flying ascends above the clouds, he sees Polaris, the North Star, enveloped by the 3 constellations of Cepheus and Cassiopeia, the king and queen of Ethiopia, and Andromeda, their daughter. He recalls how in Greek mythology, it was the child Andromeda's spilled milk that created the Milky Way. Climbing to 38,000 feet above the noise and haste and all the turbulence, he smiles with pride how the North Star that guided humanity accurately across time sits in a bowl of 3 constellations named and connected to Ethiopia. And he muses how perhaps Ethiopia too may one day be a guide to those who seek authentic destinies. Coincidentally, on Mount Ntoto, a handful of Ethiopian astrophysicists are up all night gazing at the stars. They are using state-of-the-art telescopes ensconced at the newly established Ethiopian Space Observatory. They're studying the mysteries of the universe. Dr. Gamachu is especially irritated today from the cacophony of critics decrying Ethiopia's nascent space program as a misplaced priority. Dr. Gamachu disagrees with his critics. He knows that this program will inspire the love of science Ethiopia needs for its youth to succeed in this, our new century. While gazing into space, Gamachu sees the mighty Andromeda and to its northeast, Cepheus and Cassiopeia ascending. Ethiopia is rising, he whispers. Africa is rising. We shall not, we cannot, we must not fail because our success is indelibly etched upon the stars. Thank you.
Thank you. The Corporate Council on Africa is a powerhouse in Washington, D.C. At the heart of pushing the interests of American business in Africa has been one man, With his fantastic and dedicated team, he has worked tirelessly to set the stage for this day to happen. He has worked to transform misconceptions about Africa to potential American investors and worked with African economies to make them friendlier to US business. He is deeply committed to the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa, Stephen Hayes.
Thank you, Zane. I will say, in the interest of time, that all protocol observed, except I would like to first acknowledge our United States Ambassador to the African Union, Susan Page, who is here with us today. So thank you, and we're honored that you're here. Okay. We're also very grateful to the African Union and deeply honored to once again see Madam Chairman Dlamini Zuma. We also hope that we can entertain you again in the United States, but we're honored that you would choose to be with us. We are, the Corporate Council has an international board of directors. Very briefly, some of them are here. I would like them to just simply stand very quickly to be acknowledged for their support. They're a modest group at times. We don't have a lot of time, so please stand. Thank you. In looking, also going over the sponsors, we have had more sponsors for this program than any other program that we've ever had. This surprises me somewhat, and I think also it's interesting that the businesses themselves are from all over. In agribusiness, for instance, we have Caterpillar, AGCO, John Deere here. In health, Varian, Gilead, AstraZeneca, IT, Microsoft, consumer goods, Walmart, Procter & Gamble, automobile industry, Ford, and very interestingly to us, and I think germane to what I'm about to say, is that the African supporters, Zenith Bank of Nigeria, Mota and Gil of Angola, Standard Bank and South Africa Airlines of South Africa, of course, Petroline of Benin, all major supporters of this program. So there is a growing international interest coming together on this, and we also have small businesses who have supported this, International Green Structures and Development Finance International. What they all have in common, and those other sponsors that were mentioned earlier by our chairman, the businesses know that to sell a product or build a factory, you need relationship, you need partnership, and you learn to understand and appreciate the environment in which partners must also survive to keep their hopes for a better future. That environment is not the same as the United States environment. Making partnerships for any kind of work requires wisdom, patience, and the acceptance that your partner is an equal partner in all ways and must be treated so. So too it is with governments, except that the stakes may be very much higher. The trade minister must maintain relationships with his counterparts worldwide, or the country doesn't prosper. The foreign minister must maintain relationships that are necessary for the survival of the nation and the world. And the prime minister, in the case of Ethiopia, the prime minister has the most difficult task of all: maintaining the international relationships, keeping the nation stable and secure, and building a better and more just life for the people of the nation. All that rests on the shoulders of Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, leader of the second most populous country in Africa and a very challenging neighborhood. The Prime Minister began his life in the southern nations of Ethiopia. He was educated as an engineer, which to me probably suggests he's very analytical and understands relationships in his decision making. He was involved in water engineering, which means he's interested in the life force for all humanity. So in a way, it almost seems natural with those talents that he would evolve into politics. Over a 20-year period, he has become the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Please welcome, please rise and welcome the Prime Minister of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Excellency, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to welcome you all to Ethiopia to this very important gathering of the 10th biannual U.S.-Africa Business Summit. It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to address you today. This occasion is, of course, organized by the Corporate Council on Africa, and we are very grateful to the Council for bringing together such an impressive number of distinguished business representatives, CEOs, government officials, and investors, decision makers, and managers. You have come from the United States, from Africa, and also I heard from Turkey and China, and also beyond, to take a closer look at the business and investment opportunities available in Africa and between Africa and the United States. This commendable initiative is, I believe, a demonstration of the growing ties between Africa and the United States of America. I am confident that this business summit will be well worth your time here in Ethiopia. Indeed, the summit is taking place at a time when U.S. investment flows to Africa and to Ethiopia are beginning to show promising trends. This is a real opportunity to help investors and business communities discover the potential and the prospects of investment in our continent. We believe this summit will have a real impact in generating interest among business communities, and not just in Africa and America, but also other business communities from around the globe for investment and business in Africa. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today Africa is rising and its future is bright, very bright. Its economy has been growing rapidly for the last decade, and it's among the fastest growing economies in the world. We are not frustrated by the headwind which has been expressed that affecting the global economy. 7 of the fastest growing economies of the last decade have been in the sub-Saharan Africa. The World Bank says Africa could be on the brink of an economic takeoff, much as China was 30 years ago and India 20 years ago. The United States has been a central and long-standing partner of Africa in political, social, and economic development for many years. Throughout those years, it has provided Africa with generous amounts of humanitarian and development assistance, and we are most grateful for this. Equally, I have to say that United States private sector engagement in Africa has been rather more limited, except, as the chairperson said, in extractive sectors. U.S. business and investment in Africa is simply not reaching the levels it could or it should, even extractive sectors included. Indeed, the current U.S. investment in Africa represents no more than a small percentage of the total U.S. global investment. To reach the potential expressed by the World Bank, we need to work hard to increase trade and investment between the United States of America and Africa, especially in productive sectors. Africa has substantial and untapped potential for investment, for trade, and for tourism. It has a wide range of still largely unexploited and unused natural resources, including diversified mineral deposits. Across the continent, we have different climates which can accommodate numerous agro-industrial possibilities, as well as the growing availability of cheap and clean energy. And we have a large and useful population and rapidly growing and expanding markets across the continent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all this is true of Ethiopia as well. And the government of Ethiopia has put in place
an inviting framework and encouraging conditions designed to attract foreign business and investment to help provide for continued economic development. Ethiopia has a stable economic and political environment, stability in macroeconomy, a free market economy, and attractive investment incentives. We have considerable natural resources and abundant, affordable, and skilled labor. We have put considerable attention for the young and the women. And abundant energy resources. We are zero tolerant to corruption with minimal crime rates. Companies investing in agriculture, agribusiness, and agro-processing, as well as overall agricultural production and agro-industrial value chains and processing technology, can import capital goods duty-free and receive income tax holiday privileges. We have investor-friendly legislation with attractive incentive package to encourage our growth. Our laws protect private property, and Ethiopia is a member of the World Intellectual Property Organization and the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. Our priority sectors available for investment include light manufacturing in terms of textile and apparel, where we have to fill the gap when the emerging economies labor becomes very expensive, leather and leather products, sugar, metal and industrial engineering, and pharmaceutical industries. These are all areas in which we welcome foreign companies. Other areas we encourage foreign investment is the extractive sector, which includes gold, oil and gas, and other minerals, a booming construction industry, and a range of major infrastructure projects. These include the development of hydropower, wind, and geothermal energy projects, which are clean and environment friendly, as well as road and rail construction. The government is currently in the process of expanding a series of industrial parks with adequate infrastructure for investment to investment in Ethiopia. Excellencies, Ethiopia, as Africa in general, is also doing its best to encourage integration of the regional economies. Ethiopia, for example, is working hard to integrate the Horn of Africa through infrastructure development. Our current growth and transformation plan focuses on a number of infrastructural projects, including power generation, which most of you are welcome, telecommunications and transport links that will play an important part in this regard. We are already connected to Djibouti and Sudan by power transmission lines, and the other links are planned or under construction to link up with Kenya and beyond the East African power pool. The railway line between Ethiopia and Djibouti is being upgraded and rebuilt and expected to be fully operational within the coming 3 months. A major highway and high voltage power transmission line connecting Ethiopia with Kenya is also under construction and expected to be completed by next year. The government of Ethiopia firmly believes that the provision of an affordable physical and economic infrastructure, including transportation and communication and energy, will make a crucial contribution to the economic growth of Ethiopia, of the sub-region, and of Africa as a whole. As regards to the BlackBerry, Your Excellency, we are negotiating with the company to bring about the differences we have between BlackBerry and the Ethiopian Telecom. Otherwise, all companies are working with us in Ethiopia. At the same time, we are very aware of the fact that we need additional stakeholders for these aims to be realized effectively. The private sector and private enterprise has a central role and are the engine of our growth, and I very much hope that this is something in which American investors will take part. You have rich experience which we desperately need. Indeed, on behalf of the Ethiopian government, I invite you all to invest in the opportunities we have to offer. We need you to help us in the transformation of our economy and achieve our aim of continuing to register rapid and sustainable and equitable growth to reach middle income status by 2025. I firmly believe that it would also be to your advantage. Excellencies, Ethiopia is poised to advance and develop on a significant scale. It has reached a critical point at which we are looking for increased investment to build up our economy, to sustain the promising economic growth we have already achieved, to build on our established framework to improve the lives of our people, and to lift Ethiopia out of the status of a low-income country bracket. I can assure you that my government is fully committed to encourage and assist the U.S. business community in every way possible in Ethiopia. I believe we can successfully work together for the mutual benefit of both our countries. We do have a great deal to offer. Let me also repeat that this also applies not only to Ethiopia, but to the entire African continent. Africa is on the path of increasing growth. It is looking for mutually beneficial business partnership with other countries. We Africans are of the view that our relationship with the United States should be strengthened and enhanced by expanded trade and investment ties between our business communities. Of course, we do not ignore economic cooperation in terms of aid. I trust that by the end of this summit, we will be able to see business deals reached and partnership formed between US and African companies. On that note, let me wish you useful, enjoyable, and profitable discussions during these 3 days, and every success in creating new partnership for economic development that will profit both Africa and the United States of America. I thank you for your kind attention.